The sun was barely cresting the horizon as I fired up my tractor, the rumble echoing across the 2,000 acres my family has farmed for 4 generations. My phone buzzed for the 5th time, but I ignored it. Nothing could distract me from getting these seeds in the ground, not even the angry messages from the new HOA trying to shut me down. Peaceful enjoyment, they called it, claiming my tractor was too loud and my chickens too smelly. But when I discovered they were secretly selling off my land for luxury condos, that's when I knew it was time to remind them who really controlled Oak Ridge Estates, and it all started with the water they drank. What would you do if you discovered your neighbors were stealing everything you've worked your entire life to build? The spring planting waits for no one, not even entitled neighbors with inflated egos. But at lunchtime, I couldn't ignore the digital barrage any longer. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails from my cousin, and a formal letter from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association with the subject line, "Violation Notice." I almost choked on my ham sandwich. They were claiming my tractor noise violated their peaceful enjoyment bylaws, and my chicken coops created offensive odors affecting their property values. The new housing development had only been there for 8 months. My farm had been here since 1892. The letter ended with a demand to cease all farming operations within 500 feet of their property line within 48 hours or face a $200 daily fine. I laughed out loud. They had no authority over my land. I crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. The scent of manure and freshly tilled soil, a sweet perfume compared to the condescension dripping from that letter. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car door slamming. A woman in a crisp white pants suit was marching across my front yard, clipboard in hand, trailed by 2 men in polo shirts with the Oak Ridge Estates logo. "Mr. Jackson," she called out as I stepped onto my porch, Rusty growling softly at my side. "I'm Karen Wilson, president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. We need to discuss your continued violations." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. Your HOA has no jurisdiction over my property." Karen's plastic smile didn't falter. "Actually, according to the county zoning board, your agricultural exemption expired last year. Your property is now subject to our community standards as outlined in the Municipal Code Section 42.3. That caught me off guard. My property tax bills certainly hadn't changed. "My family has farmed this land for over 100 years, I said. "No HOA can suddenly claim authority over it." Karen's smile turned cold. "Times change. We have standards now. Our residents paid premium prices for homes with guaranteed property values." She handed me another notice. "This is an official cease and desist. The board has unanimously voted to enforce these restrictions." As they left, my cousin Tom called. He lived in Oak Ridge Estates and served on the town council. "They've been planning this for months," he warned, his voice low and hurried. "Something strange is happening. Karen's been having private meetings with developers and changing meeting minutes after they're approved." I spent that night digging through county records online. My agricultural exemption was still valid for another 5 years. Karen had lied straight to my face. For the next week, I continued working my fields as usual, ignoring the increasingly threatening letters. Then came the noise complaints to the sheriff, who apologetically explained he had to respond to each one. "Look, Mike," said Sheriff Davis, an old high school friend, "I know this is ridiculous, but they're filing 4 complaints every single day. They've even started a petition claiming your farm is a public nuisance." I couldn't believe how quickly things were escalating. "Dave, my family has been feeding this county longer than that development has had paved roads. What's really going on here?" He lowered his voice. "I shouldn't tell you this, but there was a closed-door meeting last week. County commissioners, some developer from the city, and the HOA board. They're pushing hard for some big project." That afternoon, I spotted strangers in suits walking my eastern fields, taking pictures and measurements. I drove my truck across the field to confront them. "Can I help you, gentlemen? You're trespassing on private property." A tall man in an expensive suit extended his hand. "James Miller, Westview Development Corporation. Just surveying the land for preliminary planning." "Planning for what, exactly?" "This is my farm." Miller looked confused, consulting his tablet. "According to our paperwork, Westview purchased 1,700 acres from Oakridge Estates 3 weeks ago. Construction begins next month for the new Oakridge Commons shopping center and luxury condos. My heart nearly stopped. That's impossible. I never sold my land to anyone. He showed me the digital documents on his tablet, survey maps of my eastern fields bearing official county stamps and signatures. The owner listed was Oakridge Estates Community Trust. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice suddenly hoarse. No mistake, sir, Miller replied. Perhaps you should contact Oakridge. The sale was finalized last month. I raced home and pulled out my property deeds from the safe. Everything looked in order, but something wasn't right. I called the county recorder's office. I need to verify the current ownership status of my property, I explained. The clerk took my information. One moment, sir. The silence stretched too long. Mr. Jackson, the clerk finally said, there appears to be an ownership division filing from 6 weeks ago. According to our record, the majority of the property, approximately 1,700 acres, was transferred to Oakridge Estates Community Trust. You retain ownership of only the main house and surrounding 300 acres. My hands started shaking. That's impossible. I never signed any transfer documents. The documents have your signature, sir. Do you want me to email you copies? When I opened the email, I stared at what appeared to be my own signature on transfer documents I'd never seen before. How could this happen? How could the HOA sell land they didn't own? I looked out my window and spotted Karen in her luxury SUV, parked at the edge of my property, talking on her phone while staring directly at my house. When she saw me watching, she smiled and waved. The bulldozers would arrive in 4 weeks. I had less than a month to figure out how the HOA had stolen my family's legacy and stopped them before the first shovel hit the ground. I stood frozen in my muddy boots as the surveyor's words hit me like a thunderbolt. My land sold without my knowledge. Impossible. There must be a mistake. I said, showing him the property maps I kept in my truck. This has been Johnson family land for over a century. The surveyor scratched his head. Look, I just go where they tell me, but these coordinates match what Oakridge Estates provided. My hands trembled as I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, Mrs. Rivera, had known my family for decades. Frank, I was going to call you, she said, her face worried. Someone filed new property documents last month. I thought it was strange, but everything seemed properly notarized. She pulled up the records on her computer. My stomach dropped as I saw it. Official look paperwork showing 1,700 acres of my farmland now belonged to Oakridge Estates HOA. Only the 300 acres around my house remained. In my name, this is fraud, I whispered. These signatures aren't mine. I called an emergency meeting with my lawyer, Sam Grayson. This is the most raisin land grab I've seen in 30 years of practice, Sam said, examining the documents, but they covered their tracks. Well, the paperwork claims your grandfathers sold development rights decades ago and they're just now exercising them. That's ridiculous. My grandfather would never. I know, Sam nodded, but fighting this will take time. They've already sold to developers who likely had no idea the sale was fraudulent. I couldn't wait. The HOA had their monthly meeting that evening and I was going to crash it. The old community center buzzed with conversation when I walked in. Karen Wilson sat at the center table, her designer outfit and perfect blonde hair making her look like she belonged on a reality TV show, not running a neighborhood association. The room fell silent when people noticed me. This is a private meeting, Karen said coldly. Private, like the private sale of my land, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Richard Thompson, the treasurer, adjusted his glasses. Nervous. Ly, we have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Then why are there surveyors on my eastern fields today? Why is there paperwork claiming you sold 1,700 acres of my family farm to Greed Corp developers? Karen's fake smile didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps you should check your family records more carefully. That land was included in our development zone from the beginning. Richard slid some papers across the table. It's all perfectly legal. The sale is final. I glanced at the documents, more for fees showing land boundaries that had never existed. My family has the original deeds from 1892. I said, these papers are fake, and you know it. That's a serious accusation, said Janet Miller, another board member who looked genuinely confused. Karen assured us this was all above board. Karen shot Janet a warning look. The matter is settled. Security, please escort Mr. Jackson out. Our tired police officer who worked part-time security moved toward me. Sorry, Frank, just doing My job as I was outside. My neighbor Tom Baker followed me to the parking lot. Tom had moved to Oaked just a year ago, seeking the rural lifestyle that was now threatened. They've been planning this for months, he whispered, looking over his shoulder nervously. Secret meetings, discussions about expanding the community footprint. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Karen threatened anyone who spoke up. Jeff Winters questioned the legality last month and suddenly had $5,000 in HOA violations. They can find people into bankruptcy if they want to. I drove home in a daze, my family legacy crumbling around me. The farm that had fed the community for generations was about to become cookie-cutter houses and strip malls. Unable to sleep, I pulled out my grandfather's old wooden chest. Among birth certificates and yellowed photographs, I found it the original water rights agreement from 1943. The document detailed how my grandfather had allowed the creation of a reservoir owner property that now supplied water not just to our farm but to the entire surrounding area, including what was now Oaked Estates. I read deeper, my excitement growing. The agreement included specific terms. Agricultural use would always take priority in water allocation decisions, and the rights were tied to the original homestead, the 300 acres I still legally owned. At dawn, I called Sam again. They might have stolen my land through fake papers, I said, but they forgot something crucial. What's that? Sam asked, yawning. Who controls their water? Sam was silent for a moment. Frank B. Careful, this could get ugly. They started ugly, I replied. I'm just finishing it fairly. After hanging up, I noticed a bulldozer cresting the hill on my eastern field. Construction was starting already. Through binoculars, I could see Karen standing with men in suits pointing excitedly at my best wheat field. I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about water rights, easements, and local utility regulations. If they thought they could steamroll a simple farmer, they were about to learn how wrong they were. That afternoon, I visited old Mr. Patterson, who had maintained the county's water systems for 40 years before retiring. Of course, I remember that system, he said, spreading out faded blueprints on his kitchen table. Your granddad was smart. The main control junction is right here on your remaining property, always has been. While he reviewed the papers, a news van arrived. Karen must have called them, thinking they'd take her side. The reporter, Julie Ramirez from Channel 5, approached me with a microphone. Can you explain what's happening with the water supply? She asked. I smiled. I'd be happy to, I said, pulling out maps showing the original property lines and water rights documents. And I'd also like to discuss how the Oak Ridge HOA falsified documents to steal 1,700 acres of farmland that's been in my family for generations. Julie's eyes lit up. She clearly recognized a bigger story than a water dispute. By evening, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Tom texted me updates throughout. They freaking out, he wrote. Developers halted construction. They're threatening to sue the HOA for misrepresentation. The morning of the emergency HOA meeting dawned with an almost biblical intensity, a torrential downpour that mirrored the rising tide of anger flooding Oak Ridge Estates. I awoke to a text from Oliver, my lawyer, all set for court tomorrow. Judge is furious about the forged documents. We're going to get your land back. But before I could even make coffee, my phone rang. It was Elena, her voice tight with fear. Mike, you have to get over here. They're trying to flood your farm. I raced outside to find a scene of surreal chaos. 2 Oak Ridge Estates public works trucks were parked at the edge of my property, their hoses snaking across the fence line to dump water directly into my fields. The earth was already saturated, mud oozing everywhere, and the reservoir I relied on for irrigation was overflowing, threatening to breach its banks. What the hell are you doing? I yelled at the workers, who were frantically adjusting hoses, their faces grim. Just following orders, sir, one of them mumbled, avoiding eye contact. HOA said there was a risk of drought and we needed to redistribute the water. I spotted Karen standing nearby, her designer raincoat doing little to protect her from the downpour. She held an umbrella aloft, a look of manic determination in her eyes. Having a little too much water, Mr. Jackson, she called out, her voice barely audible over the roar of the trucks. Perhaps you'll reconsider our generous offer now. My blood boiled. This wasn't just about stealing my land anymore. It was about destroying everything I held dear. I knew I had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, I jumped into my truck and sped toward the main road, dodging puddles and flooded ditches. I was headed for the one place I knew could stop Karen's madness, the Oak Ridge Estates pumping station, located just inside the development's main gate. I slammed on the brakes, the tires spitting gravel as I pulled up to the chain-link fence surrounding the station. A single security guard sat inside a small booth, looking bored. It was one of the guys from Mitchell Security Solutions, the company run by Karen's brother. "Sorry, sir, this is a restricted area," he said, rolling down his window. "No unauthorized personnel allowed." I held up my phone, displaying a grainy image of the forged easement agreement. "I'm here to inspect this equipment on behalf of Pinewood Electric. See this document? It grants me access to all water-related infrastructure on my property." The guard squinted at the phone. "I've never seen that before, and I have my orders from the HOA. "Call them," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Tell them Alex Davis is here, and I'm about to shut down the entire pumping station if you don't let me in." The guard hesitated, then grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we have a situation at the pumping station. A Mr. Davis is claiming he has authorization to inspect the equipment." While he waited for a response, I watched the rain intensify, turning the road into a muddy river. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the rows of luxury homes, all unknowingly dependent on the decisions I was about to make. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Security, confirm that individual's identity. He is not authorized to be on that property. Deny access and call the police if he becomes disruptive." The guard looked at me with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. "Sorry, sir, can't let you in. You need to leave now." I took a deep breath. "Okay," I said, reaching into my pocket. "Then I guess I'll have to do this the hard way." I pulled out a pair of bolt cutters, the metal gleaming in the rain. "I'm giving you one last chance to open this gate," I said, my voice low but steady. "Otherwise, I'm cutting this lock, and I'm shutting down every pump in this station." The guard's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I replied, positioning the bolt cutters on the chain. "You have 5 seconds." As the rain lashed down, blurring the world into a gray watercolor, I pressed the bolt cutters against the chain of the Oak Ridge Estates pumping station. The young security guard, barely out of high school, stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "5, I said, my voice calm but firm, even though my heart was pounding against my ribs. "3. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers slick with rain. "Dispatch, dispatch. He's got bolt cutters. He's going to cut the lock." 2. I applied pressure to the bolt cutters, the metal groaning in protest. 1. With a snap that echoed through the downpour, the chain broke, the severed links falling to the ground with a dull thud. The guard stumbled back, his mouth agape. "I warned you," I said, tossing the bolt cutters aside. "Now, stay out of my way." I marched toward the pumping station, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead, my boots sinking into the muddy ground. The air crackled with electricity, the storm mirroring the turmoil raging inside me. The control panel was a mess of wires, switches, and gauges, a language I didn't fully understand. But I knew enough to find the master switch, the one that controlled the entire system. I hesitated for a moment, thinking of the families in Oak Ridge Estates, the elderly, the children, the people who had nothing to do with Karen's greed and power plays. But then I remembered the bulldozers tearing into my family's land, the crushed tomato plants, the forged documents, the threats, and the years of tradition they were trying to erase. This wasn't just about water, it was about defending what was rightfully mine. With a deep breath, I flipped the switch. The humming of the pumps died instantly, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the driving rain. A wave of satisfaction washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. I knew Karen would be furious, but I was done playing nice. It was time to fight fire with fire. I turned to leave the pumping station, and that's when I saw them. A line of headlights snaked down the access road, growing brighter with each passing second. It was Karen and her crew, and they were coming for me. I sprinted back to my truck, fumbling with the keys, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get back to my farm, to protect what was left of my family's legacy. I slammed the truck into gear and roared down the access road, the tires spinning in the mud, the headlights cutting through the rain like laser beams. In my rearview mirror, I saw Karen's SUV and a couple of other vehicles gaining ground, their headlights relentless. As I reached the main road, I made a sharp turn, heading toward my farm. I glanced in the rearview mirror, they were still behind me. This was going to be a long night. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I sped down the rain-slicked country roads. The rearview mirror showed the relentless headlights of Karen's pursuing vehicles, growing larger with each passing second. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me onward. The downpour intensified, blurring the world into a gray wash. The wipers struggled to keep up, smearing the approaching lights into distorted halos. I knew the back roads like the lines on my own hand, but they were treacherous in this weather. One wrong turn, one patch of standing water, and I could end up in a ditch. But I couldn't afford to slow down. I had to get back to my farm, to protect my land, to ensure that Karen and her cronies didn't have a chance to do any more damage. I glanced at the fuel gauge, nearly empty. The nearest gas station was 15 miles away, a detour I couldn't afford. "Think, Mike, think," I muttered to myself, the words barely audible above the roar of the engine and the drumming rain. That's when I remembered the old logging trail, a narrow, overgrown path that cut directly across my property, offering a shortcut to the main highway. It was risky, especially in this weather, but it was my only chance to shake them. I slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailing wildly as I made a sharp turn onto the narrow trail. The suspension groaned as the tires bounced over rocks and tree roots, the branches scraping against the sides of the truck. The logging trail was barely wide enough for the truck, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I gripped the steering wheel, navigating by instinct, trusting my knowledge of the land to guide me. In the rearview mirror, I saw the pursuing headlights disappear. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief, but I knew it wouldn't last. Karen was relentless, and she wouldn't give up easily. As I burst out of the logging trail onto the highway, I saw a sight that made my blood run cold. A police roadblock, flashing blue and red lights cutting through the rain. Karen had called in the cavalry. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt just short of the barricade. 2 officers approached, their faces grim, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. "Mr. Jackson," Sheriff Reynolds said, his voice amplified by a megaphone, "we have reports of vandalism and property damage at the Oak Ridge Estates pumping station. We need you to step out of the vehicle." I knew what this was. Karen had framed me, twisted the story, and used her influence to turn the police against me. It was a desperate move, but it might just work. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words could determine my fate. "Sheriff," I said, rolling down the window, "I can explain everything. This battle with the Oak Ridge Estates HOA taught me a powerful lesson about the true meaning of community. It's not about manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, or suppressing anyone who dares to be different. It's about standing up for what's right, protecting those who are vulnerable, and fighting for the values that truly matter." I learned that even when powerful forces try to steal your legacy, your history, and your very identity, they can never take away your spirit or the support of those who believe in you. And I realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the hearts and minds of the people who choose to stand together against injustice. In the end, it wasn't just about saving my farm. It was about defending the very soul of our community, reminding everyone that true progress isn't measured in luxury homes and soaring property values, but in the strength of our bonds and our commitment to each other. If you've ever felt powerless against a homeowners association or any other force trying to take what's rightfully yours, share your story in the comments below. Your experience can inspire others to stand up and fight for their own communities. For resources on homeowner rights, water rights, and fighting HOA overreach, check out the links in the description. You'll find information, legal templates, and support groups to help you navigate these complex situations. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of ordinary people taking extraordinary action. We believe that every voice matters and that even one person can make a difference in the fight for justice. Remember, you don't need to be a lawyer or a politician to stand up for what's right. You just need courage,